Billionaire discovers amazing dance between his disabled daughter and a black girl, revealed transformation. David Reynolds stood on the balcony of his plush Manhattan penthouse, staring at the towering skyline that mirrored his own life, beautiful yet hollow. The wind whipped through his hair, but he felt nothing. He had made his fortune in tech innovations, but deep inside, the weight of responsibility pressed down like an anchor. Raising his spirited 10-year-old daughter, Emma, brought more joy than he could express, yet he felt a vacancy that no amount of money could fill. Emma's cerebral palsy didn't define her, but it did create invisible barriers that often left David isolated and yearning for connection. What if I'm failing her, he thought, as he watched the city hum. It was a constant reminder of how much he had, and yet nothing felt worthwhile. What could he buy that would fill the gap where connection should thrive? The afternoon sun beckoned him to take Emma to the local park. The air was laced with the laughter of children, a sound he longed to be part of. Arriving at the playground, Emma's face lit up. She saw her new friend, Mia. Watching the girls together was transcendental. They danced under the afternoon sun, and for the first time, David felt a flicker of hope, a potential remedy for the unease crowded in his heart. Yet, lurking behind that light was a dark realization. Could Emma only find joy in the arms of a friend from a different world? Before long, David met Mia's mother, Tasha. She was intelligent, resilient, and juggling 2 jobs to support her family. Her strength captivated him, made him weak. Discussions flowed easily, shared dreams for their daughters, hopes for battling the challenges of life. But the conversation came with an unwelcome realization. Their worlds felt separated by an unbridgeable gap of privilege. The pressure built, a tight ball in his stomach. How could he maintain this friendship when his mansion represented a fortress, impenetrable by those like Tasha? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the days dragged on, life pulled tighter, and David received word of a corporate crisis. A data breach threatened the livelihood of hundreds of employees, including Mia's father, a diligent factory worker. David felt his heart drop, twisting like a knife. The thought of having to choose between pressuring his company into damage control and doing the right thing by supporting Mia's family crushed him. Ambition battled compassion within. Their war raging in whispers of self-doubt. Standing alone in his office, the city sprawling beneath him, he felt utterly torn between worlds. Just as he devised a plan to showcase talent inspired by Emma and Mia's friendship, the floor fell from beneath him. The crisis was worse than they thought. He was left trembling on the edge of a decision, his heart racing and breath irregular. Protecting his wealth could cost him the warmth of connection. Fighting for justice threatened his empire. The abyss yawned before him, dark and filled with mortality. David realized he had just one question to answer. Can genuine love conquer the great divide, or would he be left battling the demon of greed? David stood rigidly before the vast window of his office, the skyline stretching like a shimmering mirage. A sense of betrayal lurked at the edges of his consciousness. The weight of the impending crisis bore down on him, the laughter from the park echoing hollowly in his mind. He couldn't shake the image of Mia's father, whom he had never met, but whose livelihood depended on the decisions he was about to make. Each choice he faced felt like another thread twisting itself into the web of privilege and obligation that ensnared him. He paced the floor, each step punctuated by unresolved conflict. The corporation he had built demanded unwavering loyalty. Threats of financial loss were looming like storm clouds. Yet amidst this chaos, Emma's laughter played back in his mind, a reminder of innocence and authenticity. Could he find a way to protect both her happiness and the broader community whose struggles he had barely acknowledged? His internal monologue spiraled further. He had always viewed corporate success as the pinnacle of achievement, but it was strikingly clear now he was no longer just a businessman. He was a father faced with a moral conundrum. With every cubicle and conference room lurking in his mind, he recalled the conversations he had shared with Tasha. Her fierce love for Mia illuminated a path he had long withheld from his own heart. David took a deep breath, setting his resolve. If he could leverage his company's resources, he could address the data breach without sacrificing kindness. It was not just about saving the jobs at his firm. It was about holding the hand of a fragile community that had silently shaped the very fabric of his life and his daughter's. That thought ignited a primal urge in him. He ripped a stenopad from a nearby desk drawer and began outlining a plan, a comprehensive initiative focusing not solely on crisis management, but also fostering community engagement. He envisioned programs to bridge that gap, putting both employee and local family needs at the forefront. Emma's friendship with Mia could be the cornerstone, a living testament that true strength lay in connection. Yet doubt nibbled at the edges of his conviction. Could he withstand the backlash from shareholders who prioritized profit over empathy? Would they understand the ripple effect of compassion through his company's channels? Could this act of defiance against corporate norms tarnish the brand he had painstakingly sharpened? Each question clawed at him, testing the very foundation of who he was and who he wished to become. David knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. He couldn't simply tread lightly, he'd have to leap into the fray. The weight of his ambitions would collide with his new intentions. In that charged moment, David realized he was no longer just an architect of technology, but a steward of humanity, striving to navigate the labyrinth of wealth and responsibility. As evening shadowed the city, cloaking his penthouse in half-light, David's phone buzzed abruptly, the notifications chronicling upcoming board meetings and shareholder discussions awaited him. But beyond that screen beckoned a new world, one filled with possibilities. The urgent need to act propelled him forward. The moment of vulnerability closed in around him, and he could feel life press forward. He was tired of standing still, tired of letting others dictate who he was. As he prepared to pick up the phone and unite his vision with action, he hesitated for just a heartbeat, uncertain. Could he muster the courage to redefine his narrative? In that moment of uncertainty, a realization dawned. He was about to step into the unknown. What if his next call could not only reshape the fate of his company, but also herald a new chapter in his life, where loss and love intertwined in ways he had never imagined? It was time to face the unknown, to confront his fears, and to dive into the depths of his own resolve. But as David picked up the phone, a chilling message flashed across his screen, throwing his plans into disarray. The gravity of the situation spiraled anew, drawing him deeper into a whirlpool of consequences he could hardly fathom. The stakes had suddenly become much higher. David's pulse quickened as he stared at the message, the text blurring into an indecipherable haze. It was from his lead cybersecurity analyst, a terse warning about a deeper breach than he'd previously known. "We have a problem," it read, followed by a series of data points that felt like daggers to his resolve. The urgency of the situation pulled him further into the whirlpool of corporate chaos he had desperately tried to navigate around. He dropped the phone, its weight a stark reminder of his precarious position. The gears of his mind spun furiously as he recalibrated. This was no longer just about his company. This was about defending everything he built and protecting the lives tied to his choices.
He had just envisioned a way to bridge the gap between his corporate ambitions and community engagement, but now the stakes had been elevated dramatically. David felt the flicker of doubt resurface. Was this the moment when his concerns for Mia's friend and the community interconnected with their lives would crumble under financial scrutiny? Fragile tendrils of hope
clashed violently with the harsh realities he had to face. He sank into the leather chair that had always been a throne of power for him, yet now it felt more like an anchor. His mind raced through every critical meeting he'd attended, every hard choice he'd made. Had he truly understood the repercussions of his decisions until now? Had he been so enmeshed in balancing profit and loss that he'd failed to see the true impact of his actions on those who depended on him? He knew he had to act, but how? The board would be furious if he shifted focus away from shareholder concerns, and there would inevitably be a backlash for diverting company resources towards community service initiatives amidst this crisis. What if they turned on him, their anger transforming into betrayal? He'd built his reputation on success, on an unwavering drive to win. Everything in him screamed to fall back into the familiar patterns of competition and pragmatism. Yet, at the core of his being, at the center of this existential storm, lay the undeniable connection he felt towards his daughter. Replaying the image of Emma twirling with Mia, both girls radiated joy and innocence, uninhibited by the world's harsh realities. Could he muster the courage to prioritize compassion, even when it felt like walking into a minefield? Grit in his teeth, he picked up the phone again. He would not shrink in a moment of crisis. He would confront this head-on. With a deep breath, he dialed the analyst's number, fueling a renewed sense of determination. "What's the situation like?" he asked, his voice steadying with purpose. As they strategized on how to stem the tide of the breach, David felt clarity arise amidst the chaos. He chose to push forward with the community initiative, crafting it not just as a moral obligation, but as a necessity that could support both the community and his company during these tumultuous times. There was power in connection. He needed to harness it. Hours turned into a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and frantic decision-making. Each action echoed in his mind like marching orders, driving him forward. He could feel the energy pooling in his core, the certainty that he was no longer just weathering the storm, but actively steering the ship through the tempest. But just as things began to coalesce, another notification jolted him, a breaking development. The hacker behind the breach, someone seemingly close to the heart of his company, was about to reveal everything. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. All that he was trying to protect, all that he hoped to build, teetered on the brink of exposure. In that moment, as the shadows deepened and uncertainty loomed larger than ever, David knew the time had come to face the real adversary lurking in the shadows. The confrontation ahead would not just test his professional mettle, it would push him to redefine what it truly meant to fight for those he loved. All his choices spiraled toward a critical juncture, and he braced himself for the inevitable fallout, gritting his teeth against the uncertainty. This wasn't just a battle for financial survival anymore, it was a fight for his soul. David's focus tightened as he stared at the screen, the implications of the hacker's threat spiraling through his mind. Every inch of corporate strategy he'd crafted felt fragile at that moment, as if it might shatter under pressure. He paced the room, each step echoing with his mounting anxiety. It wasn't simply about saving his company, it was about integrity, trust, and perhaps, most unnervingly, the realization of who he had become through his relentless pursuit of success. He retraced his recent commitments, each promise binding him to a moral obligation he had ironically been ignoring. The community initiative he championed had begun with the right intentions, but somewhere along the way it had become tainted by profitability and survival tactics. Pulling up the company's vulnerability reports on his computer, he inhaled deeply, the air leaving his lungs uncomfortably. "Who could do this?" he muttered in disbelief. A growing suspicion about insiders gnawed at him, each face flashing through his memory like a slideshow. The breach wasn't just sophisticated, it was also deeply personal. He had been betrayed, possibly by someone who had his trust. The implications caused a deepening pit in his stomach. In that moment, his instincts for self-preservation lurked dangerously. He could choose to pull back, again prioritizing bottom lines and shareholder loyalty, or he could lean into the discomfort of an honest confrontation, both with his team and himself. He realized he wanted to confront this threat not simply to secure his empire, but to reclaim the integrity that had driven his ambition in the first place. A resounding determination solidified within him. David grabbed his notebook, its pages filled with sketches of corporate strategies intermingled with ideas for community growth, and began mapping a new plan. He would call an emergency board meeting, not to hide, but to reveal his vulnerabilities and confront the threat openly. But mixed with that confidence was a flicker of fear. Would they see this as weakness? What if he was rebuffed, his leadership questioned? Would the board rally behind him, or shove him aside for the sake of protecting their investments? He grappled with the knowledge that his decision would expose his vulnerability, presenting them with an image of a leader balancing on a knife's edge. Choosing to embrace the unknown, David set the meeting for the following morning. He spent the rest of the night preparing a presentation that laid bare the risks they faced, juxtaposed with the opportunity to align with the community more authentically. He knew he needed to articulate that making a meaningful impact could bolster their reputation and resilience in the face of turmoil. Mornings in the office always buzzed with energy, and he could sense the weight of expectation hanging in the air as he entered the boardroom. Executives were already assembled, murmurs of concern rippling through the crowd. David's heart raced, but he silenced the fear by reminding himself of the mission to reforge his purpose. As he stepped to the front, he scanned his audience, acknowledging both allies and adversaries. "Thank you for being here on such short notice," he began, feeling a surge of adrenaline as he launched into his presentation. He shared the realities of the breach and articulated the necessity for trust, both internally with their team and externally with the community. As he spoke, he felt a shift within him. The internal battle gave way to a sense of empowerment. He wasn't merely fighting for survival, he was igniting a broader conversation about integrity in business. As he concluded, the silence echoed painfully in the room. The board exchanged glances, a mixture of surprise and skepticism shaping their expressions. He braced himself for the inevitable backlash. Instead, a hand shot up. It was Clara, the head of marketing, who had been a proponent of the community initiative. "David," she started, her voice steady but firm, "you're right, we need to rethink our identity. But we need a plan. How do we engage with the community effectively?" His breath hitched. Hope battled doubt within him. Clara's support was encouraging, yet it also increased the stakes of the conversation. The moment felt like a fragile bridge between a flawed past and a possible redemption. "Together," he answered, locking eyes with her, "we'll initiate a transparent response to the breach, engage the community, and also rebuild trust within our walls. This has to be a united front." As more hands joined in, questions emerged and dialogues erupted. David could feel the momentum shift, yet looming in his mind was the hackers' threat. They still hadn't identified who was playing the double game. But at that moment, he found unexpected strength in vulnerability. The air buzzed with potential, change felt inevitable. And as the meeting unfolded, David knew he was on the precipice of something larger than profit margins. But just as he thought they were finding their footing, another notification buzzed on his phone, a name that made his blood run cold. Someone he had trusted was about to be unmasked, and that revelation would shake the very foundations of everything he believed in.
David's mind raced as he stared at the notification on his phone. The name glowing ominously was a stark reminder of the web of complex relationships that had formed around him, ones he had believed were built on trust, but now felt precarious. As the murmurs of his board echoed in the background, David wrestled with the implications. He had always prided himself on his ability to read people, to discern loyalty from ambition. But now the reality of betrayal threatened to unravel everything he had worked for. He excused himself from the meeting, the sound of his own heartbeat drowning out the chatter behind him. He needed to think, to process. The hallway felt
claustrophobic as he hurried towards his office, the walls closing in with each step. What if Clara's support was based on a false foundation? What if every ally he thought had his back was only waiting to capitalize on his missteps? Once behind his desk, David took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. He opened his laptop and pulled up the details of the breach, the names of those who had access to sensitive information, their positions in the hierarchy. He started mapping out potential motives. Was it purely financial gain, or was there something deeper, a vendetta against him personally? In that moment, his resolve crystallized. This was not just about a technological breach, it was a foundational betrayal that spoke to the very essence of his leadership. Rebuilding trust was imperative, but he had to identify the source of the problem first. Suddenly, a realization dawned on him. The people he had surrounded himself with, calculated and competent as they were, had remained just that. He had sought out experts, influencers, and high achievers, but had he truly cultivated genuine connections? His mind drifted to the community initiatives he had once championed, driven by the belief that connection fostered loyalty. Yet he had let the relentless pursuit of market share overshadow the human element. Determinedly, he flipped through his notebook, sketching out another plan. David would confront this head-on, not just in terms of the tech vulnerabilities, but by re-engaging with his team on a personal level. He had to address the dynamics that led to distrust, including his own shortcomings as a leader. Returning to the boardroom, he noticed the palpable tension lingering in the air. The discussions had shifted. People were hesitant now, looking for direction. David cleared his throat, taking a moment to gauge his audience. The fear of finding a traitor was mirrored in their worried expressions. "I need to be transparent with all of you," he declared, feeling an unexpected wave of confidence wash over him. "We are facing threats that extend beyond the realm of business. These threats are rooted in trust, and I acknowledge my role in our current struggle." He met Clara's gaze, unwavering. "We have all been focused on the numbers, the profits, and the projections, but what I should have prioritized is you, my team, your concerns, your integrity." Amidst the renewed unrest, Clara nodded, sensing the shift. David laid out his plan, not just to fortify their cybersecurity measures, but to strengthen the bonds within the team. He proposed regular trust-building sessions and transparent discussion platforms, encouraging everyone to voice their fears about the present situation and beyond. As reactions flooded in, the tension began to dissipate. David watched as the hardened expressions softened, a glimmer of hope appearing in the eyes of his executives. It wasn't just about saving their company anymore. It was about creating an environment where trust could flourish. Just as he began to feel the momentum swing in his favor, a knock on the door broke through the charged atmosphere. It was Clara, her expression grave as she gestured for him to step aside. His heart raced as she revealed a discovery that could change everything they had just built. The walls he had started to fortify may be about to crumble again, and this time it was a matter of life or death, not just for his company, but for the very essence of who he had become. Could those closest to him be involved? The air crackled with anticipation, and David knew the next confrontation was imminent. David stepped outside the boardroom, his mind a storm of anxiety and adrenaline. Clara leaned against the wall, disappointment etched on her face. The urgency in her eyes sent another pulse of dread through him. He had barely begun to rebuild the foundations of trust when this new threat pulled him back to square one. "What did you find, Clara?" he asked, his voice steady even as his insides churned. "It's about the logs," she replied, her fingers nervously toying with the edge of a folder. "I looked deeper into the data breach, and there's something you need to see. Someone accessed the system and deleted key files, but more concerning is who did it." David's heart raced. He had anticipated potential adversaries, competitors perhaps, but hearing Clara call attention to someone within their own ranks twisted his gut. "Who?" "Daniel," she said quietly. "He's been the most vocal against some of the changes we implemented in the last few weeks. It looks like he was responsible for the breach." David's heart raced. He had anticipated potential adversaries, competitors perhaps, but hearing Clara call attention to someone within their own ranks twisted his gut. "Who?" "Daniel," she said quietly. "He's been the most vocal against some of the changes we implemented in the last few weeks. It looks like he was responsible for the breach." The realization hit him like a punch. Daniel had always been a gifted strategist, but also the most resistant to his vision for the company. David had understood the tension, but had brushed it off, convinced he could work it out. Now it seemed the man had turned that tension into treachery. What was his motive? David pressed, leaning closer, desperate for clarity. Power, maybe even revenge. But the files that were deleted contained information on team changes, upcoming budgeting proposals, everything that you laid out in the meeting. If he's aligned with someone outside the company, they could use that information against us. David's mind raced through the implications. If Daniel had allies, real alliances formed in whispers, his team could be fundamentally fractured. He had sought to strengthen the bonds between everyone after their earlier confrontation, yet now seeds of division were planted unexpectedly. "Get me those logs," he commanded, his voice taking on a sharper edge. "I want to see every detail, every email, every chat. We need to know what we're dealing with." As Clara nodded and slipped back into the boardroom to retrieve the data, David felt a cold wave of determination wash over him. He realized each betrayal was a product of his own failures as a leader. While he labored to foster an environment of trust, perhaps he had underestimated how deeply people could feel alienated in pursuit of progress. He paced the empty hallway, reflecting on his leadership style. Had he been so focused on results that he had overlooked the cracks in their foundation? Running a company was not just about figures and strategies. It was about believing in people, even when the world of business threatened to overshadow their humanity. Clara returned, file in hand, but before David could open it, she spoke again, her tone urgent. "There's something else. I think we need to consider that others may be involved. We might be looking at a conspiracy." The words sent a chill down David's spine. Conspiracy. The idea of multiple betrayals rooted within his own company was almost too much to bear. Had his aspirations blinded him to the relationships he had considered less critical? "Plan a meeting with Daniel," he said, spine straightening. "I want to confront him directly. If he's behind this, I need to know why he made this decision, and if he's acting alone." Clara's brow furrowed. "David, this could backfire. He may have supporters." "Then we deal with that if it arises," he insisted, aware of the challenge that lay ahead. It was vital to regain his footing, to take control of the narrative. Confrontation was inevitable, but each step required careful strategy. He could not afford to lose any more ground. As he prepared to summon this potential adversary, David felt the weight of uncertainty settle over him. He was no longer just fighting for the company. He was fighting to reclaim his role, his identity as an effective leader. The shadows of skepticism had crept too close, and now the battle for trust would be fought in the open. Just before stepping into the next meeting, something stirred within him. It was a forgotten part of himself, a sense of empowerment driven by clarity and urgency against the tide of betrayal. David felt the focus shift. It was no longer solely about protecting his company. It was about drawing lines, defining loyalty, and confronting the deeper truths buried beneath the surface. As he walked into the room to face Daniel, a tumultuous mix of anticipation and fear filled him. It was time to uncover the hidden alliances and hidden motives that threatened the very essence of his leadership. With a deep breath, he pushed the door open, ready to confront the truth. The moment of reckoning had arrived, and in that instant, he knew everything was about to change. David stepped into the conference room, its sterile atmosphere intensified by the tension swirling around him. His eyes locked onto Daniel, who sat at the far end of the table, fingers steepled in front of him, an unsettling calm on his face that contrasted with David's inner turmoil. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and as the silence enveloped the room, David felt the weight of every decision he had made pressing down on him. "Thank you for coming, Daniel," David said, deliberately steadying his voice to, "I wanted to discuss some recent developments concerning our security protocols." Daniel arched an eyebrow, his demeanor unflinching. "I hope this isn't about the latest data breach. I can't imagine I'm on your short list of suspects." David inhaled deeply, noting the subtle challenge in Daniel's tone. "Your access logs show that you had significant involvement in the breach. I need you to explain why you'd make that choice." Daniel leaned back, folding his arms, and a smug smile crept across his lips. "You're mistaken. I'm not the enemy here, David. It's not about me. It's about what you're trying to do. You've pushed changes that many of us don't agree with. There's a reason for discontent, and it doesn't stem from me alone." Each word felt like a tactical strike against David's authority, a reminder of the fractures he had tried to mend. He considered the implications of Daniel's insistence on a larger dissent. Were there other players lurking in the shadows? His stomach churned with the gravity of the threat he faced. "What do you mean by many of us?" David asked, looking for cracks in Daniel's facade. "A discontented team is an ineffective one. You might think your vision is clear, but it's obscured by your overconfidence. What's left is confusion and anger," Daniel replied, his tone dripping with disdain. "The deletions were a cry for help, not a move against you." David could feel the fury bubbling beneath the surface, but he knew that reacting emotionally could further erode his position. "This isn't a game, Daniel. You're jeopardizing everything we've built." His voice was low, laced with a steel resolve. "You need to understand that. We're chasing progress, together, not against one another." "Progress? At what cost?" Daniel shot back, his eyes narrowing. "At the expense of your own team? You can't just sweep over people's concerns because they don't align with your goals." With each volley, David felt the metaphorical ground shift beneath him. His humility, previously sidelined by ambition, demanded space in the conversation. What if Daniel was conveying the fragmented voices of a team he had failed to fully engage? "I can't support a leader who's blind to the effects of his choices," Daniel accused, leaning forward, challenging David to deflect. The challenge brought a wave of clarity. Instead of crumbling, David recognized an opportunity for vulnerability. "You're right about one thing, Daniel. I've been focused on the big picture and may have overlooked the deeper implications on the team's morale. I want to rectify that, but I need your help." The tension slackened, but only slightly. David pressed on, grounding himself in the moment. "This isn't just about me. It's about us. If you're right about your peers feeling similarly, then I need you to be part of the solution, not the problem." Daniel blinked, uncertainty creeping into his expression. "Are you really willing to listen?" David nodded, a sense of resolve surging through him. "Committed to this newfound transparency of purpose. There's a team meeting coming up. I want you to bring your thoughts, constructively. Let's discuss the changes openly, all of us." There was a brief pause. the two men caught in a silent exchange of expectations. "Consider it," David said, feeling the shift in the dynamics, not just between Daniel and himself, but within his own understanding of leadership. As he turned to leave, Daniel's voice called out, carefully measured. "You know this isn't just about one person, or even the changes. It reflects on you as a leader. It's time to face that." David stepped out of the conference room, the weight of those words settled heavily on him. He had opened a door, but now he needed to step through it. What would a real dialogue look like? How could he genuinely connect with his team? Determined to change course, he resolved to address the group's concerns head-on. However, as he walked back to his office, a nagging question lingered. Could he truly hold on to both his vision and the collective needs of his team? The moment of truth was approaching. As he prepared to face a larger challenge, David realized the path to redemption required not just confronting Daniel, but also the demons within himself that had led to this fracture in the first place. David entered his office with a mix of adrenaline and apprehension coursing through him. The previous exchange with Daniel echoed in his mind, rattling almost like an urgent mantra. You need to face this. He had taken the first step toward openness and collaboration, but the real test loomed ahead. Could he sustain this newfound humility in front of an entire team? He sat down and pulled out the agenda for the upcoming meeting, a blank slate tainted with the ink of anxious doubt. Beneath each bullet point, a cloud of uncertainty loomed. What if the team couldn't let go of their grievances? What if they confronted him with a barrage of criticisms that he had no way to counter? He shook his head, dispelling the doubts. This was not the time for retreat. Instead, he focused on the plan. Could opening the floor transform the tumultuous atmosphere? He began drafting a few questions, ones that would invite honesty and vulnerability. "What concerns you most about the recent changes?" he wrote, then paused. Shouldn't he also be prepared to share his thoughts, igniting a dual exchange? He added, "I want to share my vision and hear how it's impacting each of you." Suddenly, the door pushed open, with a light knock. It was Lisa, one of the newer members of the team. "Hey, David, got a minute?" Her face bore a hint of expectation mingled with uncertainty. "Of course, Lisa. Come in," he replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I heard about the meeting," she began, hesitating slightly. "Is it really going to be as open as you say?" "Absolutely. I need to know how everyone feels," he asserted, hoping to project confidence. She frowned slightly, crossing her arms. "Some people are really unhappy about what's been happening. There's a lot being said behind the scenes." David felt a twist in his stomach at her words. They confirmed the turmoil he hoped to address. "Such as?" he prompted, careful not to push too hard. "It's just, there are changes that seem to prioritize efficiency over collaboration. People are feeling isolated," she confessed, her voice softening. "I think they're worried they won't have a voice in decisions that affect their work." David absorbed her words, each one landing with the weight of significance. "That's vital feedback. If I continue to overlook these concerns, what kind of leader will I be?" Her eyes widened slightly, and he sensed the shift in her demeanor. For the first time, he perceived a glimmer of hope in her expression. "I think being open will really help, but it needs to feel genuine." "Then that's what I'll aim for, genuine dialogue." The commitment stirred an unfamiliar resolve. He just had to remember that's what this was about, transforming himself, evolving, not just into a manager, but a leader. Lisa nodded thoughtfully, then added, "Just be prepared. Some people might challenge you. They might not hold back." He appreciated her honesty. "If they do, at least I'll be truly listening. That alone will mean I'm on the right path." As the conversation wrapped up, David felt a faint shimmer of excitement mixed with foreboding. This was the new terrain he would traverse, stepping into vulnerability rather than hide behind authority. However, as Lisa left, a creeping thought emerged. What if the exchange, instead of healing fractures, exposed deeper rifts? What nightmares lurked beneath the surface that he had yet to face? He gathered the notes from their discussion into his folder, shifting his attention to the ticking clock. The team meeting was approaching, and with it, a moment fraught with potential upheaval. How would they respond to his willingness to listen? With an urgent determination fueling him, he inhaled deeply, preparing for the journey ahead. The battle was not only against discontent, but also within himself. The struggle to be a leader, while still acknowledging his shortcomings. As the final minutes ticked away, a sense of uneasy anticipation settled over him. Whatever revelations awaited him, he was unprepared for the possibility that some truths might challenge his vision more than he expected. He straightened his back, ready to face what lay ahead, knowing that the moment of truth was fast approaching. Would he emerge transformed, or would his vulnerabilities unravel the very foundations he was trying to uphold? David's heart raced as he made his way to the conference room, where his team was already gathering. The air felt thick with tension, each attendee's body language expressing a blend of anticipation and skepticism. He had never walked into a meeting with such palpable uncertainty. It felt like being a child on the first day of school, holding a mix of hope and anxiety. He took a deep breath before stepping over the threshold. Once inside, he paused, scanning the room. Eyes came to rest on him, some curious, others narrowed with judgment. This was the moment that would define him, not just as a manager, but as a leader willing to accept the truths he had previously shielded himself from. "Thanks for being here," he started, his voice steady, yet tinged with nerves. "Today, I want to open a conversation. There are challenges we must address, and I'd like us to speak openly." Some faces tensed further at his words. Had they already rehearsed their critiques in their minds, or was there a layer of hope buried beneath their discontent? He dug into his prepared agenda abruptly. He needed to establish a baseline for dialogue rather than let the discomfort linger. "First, I want to hear your thoughts on our recent changes. What are your biggest concerns?" Silence hung heavy before anyone spoke. Then, almost as if on cue, Mark, a senior analyst known for his sharp tongue, leaned forward. "You really want to know? People feel ignored. Projects are pushed through without our input, and it's like we're just cogs in your efficiency machine." David felt the heat rise in his cheeks. There it was, the truth, raw and unrefined. Mark's words cut through his carefully constructed facade. For the first time, he sensed the room collectively lean into the discomfort of honesty. "I understand that perspective," David replied, forcing the words to flow easily. "I want to find ways to make sure everyone feels heard, but I need your help in figuring out how." Another voice interjected, this time from Susan, a talented programmer who had been growing increasingly disillusioned. "It feels like you only want us to fall in line with your agenda. What about our ideas? We want to contribute meaningfully, but our feedback is often dismissed." Each critique stung, yet beneath the pain, he felt a surge of clarity emerge. They weren't just voicing grievances, they were laying the groundwork for collaboration. This was a pivotal moment, and he had to meet it with relentless honesty. "I see your points, and you're right," he admitted, surprising even himself with the admission. "I let my vision cloud the value of your input. I want to change that. Let's improve how we collaborate." Slow nods from the team began to ripple through the room. David felt a sense of connection tightening the fabric of the gathering. For the first time, he wasn't speaking down to them, but engaging side by side in their shared struggle. Feedback continued to flow, revealing layers of underlying issues he had overlooked. Gina, the quietest voice in the team, surprised everyone when she spoke, her fragility making her words weighty. "It's not just about the work we do, it's about the atmosphere. It feels tense and competitive rather than supportive." That struck a chord with David. He realized how much of his internal drive had led to an environment that stifled creativity. He hadn't just been focused on outputs, but had forgotten the culture that nourished those outputs. In this moment of conflict, he found the seed of what he desired: collaboration. "Thank you for sharing that. I want to foster an environment where we uplift each other. My role isn't to be a gatekeeper, but to be your supporter." He could see the skepticism begin to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism. There was still much to unpack, but opening this door felt like a crucial turning point. One by one, others added their thoughts, and as discussions unfolded, he noted how each face gradually transformed, the weight of unresolved grievances lightening. But deep within him, a sense of doubt flickered. As the meeting began to wind down, he felt the weight of an unsettling truth. Had he truly begun to change, or was this just the first step towards stumbling again? As the room finally quieted, David glanced around at the faces in front of him, sensing the change, yet still grappling with the fear of stepping back. He reminded himself, the biggest journey was still ahead. Could he maintain the momentum and truly integrate this newfound commitment into his leadership style, or would the old habits resurface once the adrenaline faded? The thoughts churned within him as he stood to conclude the meeting. Let's make it a priority to keep these conversations going. I need all of you as partners in this. As he walked out, a realization struck. While he had invited openness, the real challenge was sustaining it in the days to come. Would his willingness to evolve withstand the pressures of expectations and deadlines? David glanced back at the team with both hope and trepidation. The battle for authentic leadership was just beginning, and with it the question lingered. Could he honor this commitment, or would he retreat once confronted by the weight of responsibility? David could hardly believe the change that had unfolded during the past few weeks. As he stood before the expansive window of his penthouse, watching the Manhattan skyline stretch before him, he felt a sense of clarity he had long yearned for. This was not merely a backdrop to his wealth. It had become a symbol of connection, community, and personal evolution. The victories in the conference room had transcended corporate dialogue. They were a foundation for his promise to be a more compassionate leader. The meeting with his team had transformed David from a leader driven by profit margins to one truly invested in the welfare of his employees. The formerly stifling walls of his office now felt welcoming, filled with echoes of laughter from team-building sessions and open discussions about innovation. Emma, who thrived within her friendship with Mia, had ignited in him the understanding that genuine leadership arose from the human connection, not just ambitious goals. With unwavering resolve, David had implemented weekly meetings, not just to discuss company performance, but to foster an environment where every voice mattered. Clara, his ally, had become a champion of these changes, frequently checking in to ensure the team felt empowered. He had taken his daughter's friendship with Mia as a blueprint to demonstrate that love bridges gaps in understanding. In committing to that ideal, he had nurtured a new culture where empathy intertwined with achievement. But as the horizon shifted colors at dusk, a knot of apprehension tightened in his chest. Corporate decisions were often laden with complexity, and some shareholders still resisted the monumental shift in leadership focus. Accountability still called him forward, urging him to prove that this change could yield tangible results. Recognizing this tension, David prepared for the upcoming board meeting. He meticulously articulated how the community initiatives he had championed were not mere donations, but a transformative strategy to bolster employee loyalty and brand integrity. His newfound confidence surged, echoing the sentiments of a leader galvanized by personal and professional metamorphosis. The meeting unfolded amid an air of skepticism, yet, as David confidently shared the success metrics from their new community programs, a subtle shift began to ripple through the boardroom. He articulated how open dialogues with employees had led to innovative solutions for the crisis they had faced months prior. By prioritizing our people, he declared, we safeguard not just our profits, but our very reputation. Compassion is our strongest asset. To his surprise, after a compelling statistic revealed enhanced productivity and morale stemming from increased engagement, uncertain expressions morphed into nods of understanding. When Clara announced that employee turnover had dropped significantly since implementing these changes, murmurs of approval danced around the room. The realization dawned upon him that his personal commitment to transformation was resonating in the professional realm. But even in those moments of triumph, David kept sight of the precarious balance he had wrought. He sensed shadows of doubt hovering, but chose instead to focus on validating the input and needs of his team. With each challenge met, he conquered relational barriers, proving that addressing issues collaboratively yielded more than numerical success, it inspired trust. Returning to his office filled with energy from the meeting, David felt the familiar tug of Emma's laughter echoing in his mind. In recognizing the lessons from her friendship with Mia, he finally understood that each struggle traversed had unveiled layers of authenticity within him. He was no longer just a businessman cloaked in ambition. He was a father, leader, and advocate. As the sun dipped below the skyline, David looked toward the future. His daughter's eyes mirrored hope and potential, reminding him that his true achievement lay not just in profits, but in the transformative power of connection. Today marked a new chapter in his journey, a definitive moment of embracing a purpose anchored in humanity. David exhaled, filled with a sense of profound satisfaction. He had truly grown. What began as a struggle turned into a story of resilience, yielding measurable growth and recognition. While challenges awaited, he had secured a place that mattered, one where he was not just a contributor, but a steward of change. It was time to share this journey with you. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that can inspire transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure more people see these compelling journeys of personal achievement. Comment your reactions and theories about what you've read. Your insights matter. And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel to foster more impactful narratives.